Hi, my name's Colby Kegel, and I'm the MariaDB Enterprise Technical Lead here at MariaDB Corporation. Today we're going to talk about the MariaDB Enterprise Cluster and MariaDB MaxScale solution in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. The screen I have up here is some simple documentation that I created in our knowledge base. I recommend you take a look through this. It'll tell you a lot about the solution, help you understand how to deploy it, and tell you what you can do with it once it's deployed. But for now, let's skip straight over to the Azure Marketplace where we can do the deployment process. So I have that up here in this tab. As you can see, it's azuremarketplace.microsoft.com. And once you're there, we can just search for MariaDB. You'll find the MariaDB Enterprise Cluster solution here. Now on the left, you'll notice there are two buttons. One is Get It Now, which is what you can use to deploy a full set of the solution. Another is the Test Drive. We'll talk a bit about the test drive later, and I'll show how to do that. But the test drive is a way to deploy the solution for free without having to pay for the compute resources and use it for 2 hours before it automatically shuts down. So that's a great option if you just want to kick the tires and get a look at this topology. First, though, let's walk through the full deployment process, and that's done by clicking the Get It Now button. So that forwards us over to the portal. If you're already in the portal, you can just search for MariaDB there and you'll find the same solution to deploy without having to first go through that marketplace page. Here we can hit Create to start this process. There's 4 steps that we have to go through. So the first of these is just filling out some really basic information, the cluster name. This is used as a basis for the DNS name used to connect to the cluster and for some of the host names. So let's just pick, we'll do MariaDB Cluster 1. And I'll create a new resource group with the same name to simplify things. You'll have to make sure you choose the correct subscription here. I think that sponsorship one still works. Now we choose the specifications for the nodes that will form the cluster. There's 2 different things you have to do here. One is to pick the data node VM size, the other is to pick the MaxScale VM size. So the data nodes are the actual MariaDB instances that run in the back end. You have a variety of options to choose from here, and they all of course have different prices. The least expensive of these is the DS2 VM, which is the default, and it has 2 cores, 7 gigs of memory, and it is a DS series VM, so it does have access to SSD storage. Now this is the monthly estimated cost if you have this running all month, 3 of them. The hourly cost is much lower than that, of course. We'll keep the default size here for this. You can also choose the storage account type. Locally redundant storage is the hard disk based storage. Premium storage is SSD based storage. So premium storage is going to give you a lot better performance, but it does cost more. So that's something to keep in mind. For this template, you can choose the disk size for each of the backend nodes. The default 128 is fine for testing. If you have more data you want to load into the cluster, you might need to choose a bigger disk. This simplified template doesn't support multiple disks or striping or any of that stuff, so this is a very simple storage situation here. Now for the MaxScale VM, you can choose some of the similar things that you could choose for the data node VM. This again depends on the number of cores you want to have and how much memory. If you're doing something a bit more complicated, you may want to choose MaxScale nodes with more memory so that the MaxScale process has a bit more room to work. You'll choose an SSH login name, and you need to paste your SSH public key here. So on a Mac, you can use pbcopy to copy that and back over, paste it, and there you go. Okay. Here we have to choose a complicated password. It has some complicated regex that you have to follow, so just try until you get it and make sure you remember what you used. You can set up a different name for an app schema if you want to, and of course a different username. This is for an application to connect to the cluster. Here for load balancer visibility, you choose whether you want the cluster to be accessible only from within the private network, the virtual network in Azure, or whether you want to be able to connect directly to the cluster from outside Azure from the internet at large. Obviously that has some security implications, And you would never ever want to do that in a production situation. But maybe for testing, you have an application on your laptop that you want to run and connect to this MariaDB cluster in the cloud, in which case you might well want to just do this for that. So it's up to you if you want to choose public or internal load balancer. All this is discussed in more detail in the documentation. So if you have any questions or doubts, take a look at that. So now we move on to the summary. Just take a look at it, make sure all the stuff looks right, make sure it looks like what you wanted, and you can hit OK and move on to the very final stage. This stage is called buy. You're not actually purchasing anything from MariaDB in this situation, so you're not establishing a relationship with us for purposes of a MariaDB Enterprise subscription or for getting support or anything like that. This is agreeing that you're purchasing Microsoft Azure resources. So when you go through this deployment, you're actually going to be paying for the resources running in the cloud. You're going to be paying for the VMs and the storage. So let's hit purchase. And what this is going to do in the background is to actually start these VMs. It's going to take about 17 minutes to do this. It has to start the 3 data node VMs in the background. It has to start the 2 MaxScale VMs. It has to make sure MariaDB is set up. And it has to bootstrap the cluster and then have MaxScale connect to the cluster. So you can actually monitor the deployment here. You can see the nodes that are being deployed. You can see things starting to happen. Refresh here will show you some more stuff that goes on. If you want, you can take a look. Otherwise, sit back, wait about 15 to 20 minutes, and come back and check, and you should find your cluster.